Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Dome9 webinar, Understanding Your Role in the Shared Responsibility Model for Cloud Security. My name is Thelen Blum, and I will be your host for today's webinar. I'm the Senior Product Marketing Manager at Dome9, and I'm here with Matt Ambrosiak, Cloud Solutions Architect for Dome9 Security. A couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. This webinar is being recorded and will be made available on our website afterwards. All attendees are in listen-only mode. We will close with Q&A at the end of the session. If you would like to ask a question, please type it in the questions window of GoToWebinar, and Matt will address as many questions as possible, time permitting. We also have 4 handouts: a copy of Dome9 ARC, Dome9 IAM Safety, and Dome9 Compliance and Governance product briefs, along with our Dome9 Clarity feature brief. We also have, through our website, an ebook, and I encourage you to download it, titled The Definitive Guide to Architecting and Maintaining Robust Security in Your AWS Environments. I have provided the link in the chat window at this time. Feel free to download this content at any time during the webinar. I want to present a little background on Matt before we get started. Matt Ambrosiak is a Cloud Solutions Architect for Dome9 Security. As a certified AWS Solutions Architect professional, Matt is dedicated to cloud technologies and a champion of cloud adoption. Matt has 15 years of hands-on experience in networking, virtualization, and DevOps. He's a former DBA, Cisco CCNA, and Scrum Master. Matt has spent his career consulting to Fortune 100 clients and the 4 biggest accounting firms. Matt has a master's degree in project management from Keller University and a BS in Network and Communications Management from DeVry University. Now launching into our webinar discussion today, public cloud promises to increase security, but only if certain best practices are followed. Cloud providers like AWS use a shared responsibility model wherein they provide security of the cloud with a secure infrastructure. And as the customer, you are responsible for security in the cloud. As an AWS customer, you will benefit from a data center and network architecture built to meet the requirements of the most security-sensitive organizations. Customers retain control of what security they choose to implement to protect their own content, platform, applications, systems, and networks no differently than they would for applications in an on-site data center. The key to being secure is a solid understanding of your responsibility so you can build a cloud security strategy to defend your environment from malicious attacks. In the 60-minute webinar, Dome9 will review where the gap in security usually occurs, the keys to network security configuration management, and best practices to secure your environment with deep visibility, automated compliance, and advanced IAM protection. Without further ado, I will now pass the ball to Matt. Let's get started.
Thank you, Thelen. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Matt Ambrosiak with Dome9, and we're here to understand the shared responsibility model for cloud security. So I wanted to jump in and kind of explain what that exactly means. So the shared responsibility model in the public cloud, before we understand that, we need to take a step back and understand the traditional data center. In a traditional data center, an organization is responsible for building out racks of servers, storage, and network hardware. You install the virtualization operating system and manage this infrastructure using a variety of tools. And as you grow towards capacity, you must order and build out more infrastructure. So all the while, you are responsible to handle physical access, identity and access management of services, encryption, network access, power, connectivity, disaster recovery, and more. So a virtual machine's time to availability after a request is made by a business unit is dependent on approval workflows and technical resources to get the job done end to end. So moving to the public cloud solves some of those problems, but creates an interesting situation, which is called the shared responsibility model. And in the public cloud world, this is a relationship between your organization and the cloud provider. Now looking at the public cloud, the cloud providers handle the bottom half of this model for you, which is great. These are the reasons why we moved to the cloud. Most organizations do not truly want to be in the data center business, right? They want to run their businesses and have the confidence that their applications are always available to their end users. Organizations would rather focus on innovation and the business rather than constantly worrying if they can meet the growing demand of power and infrastructure. With public cloud, we're moving past large capital expenditures and into a pay-for-what-you-use model for metered services by the hour. In this model, you, the customer, are responsible for secure operating systems, platforms, and data. The cloud providers give you services and features to enhance security, such as identity and access management, also known as IAM. So with IAM, you can manage users and users' permissions in a subset of cloud services such as infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. Platform as a service being any service where you are even further abstracted away, taking you away from the infrastructure layer and operating system level access entirely. So you are responsible for managing access to these services, right? So the server configuration such as hardening, storage configuration such as encryption, network configuration such as firewall, access through security groups, and you are always responsible for how these applications and services are configured from a general perspective, but most certainly from a security perspective. So now that we understand the security responsibility is largely on those organizations which adopt the public cloud. The cloud provider does their part to protect their IaaS and PaaS services, but it's up to you to ensure the proper configuration, such as user and network access and data protection for applications and services that you can deploy. Gartner states that through 2020, 80% of cloud breaches will be due to customer misconfigurations, mismanaged credentials, or insider theft, not cloud provider vulnerabilities. Many cloud service providers invest heavily in incorporating higher levels of security into their products to continue building confidence that their data is more secure. So then the question becomes, how are you protecting your cloud environment? So looking at this diagram here, the traditional method of controlling access to a virtual machine is through gateway and firewall control, right? So you may think of granting access to services as just punching a hole through a firewall, which is a piece of infrastructure sitting in your data center. But now with cloud, the gateway-centric approach no longer works. Access can be granted to services through a variety of methods, such as network security groups and ACLs. With some services, such as S3 storage, a network security group may not be involved at all to gain access to data, which is a whole other topic. So in terms of solving the problem of this gateway-centric approach in the cloud, we can at least do our part with native cloud network segmentation using security groups. You need to be sure they are configured correctly with no exposures. So, for those who are not familiar, this is the AWS console. And this is a listing of all the available services. Many of these services are crossed with other services and have integration points between them. So the problem is that agents can't be installed on most of these services. You don't have access to them from the operating system level, even if you wanted to. In the shared responsibility model, you're responsible to configure the security between these services. The solution, though, is an API-driven agentless security orchestration. So you have to remember, AWS best practices recommend you segment your AWS accounts by business unit and environment, if not by application. To manage security manually, you can quickly, managing security manually generally can quickly become a challenge, right? So even if you could automate some of it, you still have humans poking around in your cloud environments, in your cloud platforms, hoping they don't make a mistake. So now introduce multi-cloud, into your environment, such as Azure and Google Cloud as well. And now you have a real challenge on your hands, hoping you have the appropriate expertise under your roof to ensure everything is secure and appropriately configured. So here are some of the top management challenges for the cloud. So this information is actually based on this year's 2017 Cloud Security Report conducted by Crowd Research Partners of 350,000 of the information security community on LinkedIn to explore how organizations are responding to the security threats in the cloud and what tools and best practices IT cybersecurity leaders are considering in their move to the cloud. So as cloud investment continues to grow over 20% as organizations looking for faster time to deployment, scalability, reduced maintenance, and lower cost. But there is one aspect of cloud that consistently worries IT and security professionals, and that is how do I achieve high levels of security in the cloud? So the top 3 cloud management challenges these security professionals listed were: 1, visibility, right? Compliance, and setting consistent security policies. So here are some common management challenges in the cloud. So around operational visibility, we're wondering, what is the network perimeter of my cloud environment? What assets do I have on the network? What is exposed? What is the real effective network security posture governing my assets? Around compliance and governance, are my cloud environments meeting my compliance regulations? Are they adhering to my internal corporate IT policies? And for consistent security policies, questions around, am I setting the right network and IAM policies to create the security posture I want? Am I able to find and fix misconfigured ports and services? So there's a lot of complexity in this cloud security lifecycle, right? And so what we've heard from customers repeatedly is that it's getting started. Well, getting started in the cloud is easier in the beginning, of course. Perhaps many of you are already there. When there are fewer assets, of course, to deploy and configure. But as you can imagine, as you continue to scale into the cloud, and to typically about 100 assets, which is what we see as the breaking point, with multiple security groups and multiple users, knowing that your cloud is truly secure can be very daunting, right? So visibility, automation, and enforcement are key components to making sure your cloud is indeed secure. So enter the Dome9 Arc security platform, which is a SaaS platform for comprehensive security and compliance orchestration across public cloud environments. And Dome9, there are 3 pillars which make up the Dome9 platform. So Dome9 is indeed a security and compliance orchestration platform, but you can also think of Dome9 as a cloud security control plane. So we're looking at network security. With the network security module, we can centrally manage your AWS security. There you can manage security groups across accounts and regions, review inventory of protected resources, and with full protection mode enabled, manage security group tamper protection for a region, VPC, or specific security groups. And even entire regions may be locked down by the means of security group control by Dome9. Dome9 also has a tool to visualize your environment into security zones using the security group metadata we regularly pull from your account. But we're more than just network security. We also support compliance and governance. And with the compliance and governance module, we can ensure your accounts are adhering to regulatory compliance standards such as PCI and HIPAA and more. Dome9 allows you to create custom policies to enforce your own rules too. And then beyond that, we provide privileged identity protection. With the privileged identity protection module, which is a security hardening layer for cloud identity and access management. Dome9 provides protection against irrevocable actions by IAM users by providing just-in-time, short-lived, out-of-band authorization using a mobile app running on either Android or iPhone. So, where does Dome9 fit in all this? Looking from the top down, we have what is called the Dome9 ARC. ARC standing for Assess, Remediate, and Control. And what we intend to do is, wherever possible, not only show you the issues, but we also want to have you be able to fix those issues from within the platform as well. So looking at Assess, we offer the ability to visualize network topology, understand your security posture, quickly identify misconfigurations and threats, and test against industry best practices. Under Control, we're there to enforce those best practices, prevent unauthorized changes, conform to compliance standards. And lastly, Remediate, whereas we actually go in and enable you to fix issues with policy configurations, model a gold standard, and actively protect environments. So we're looking at the clarity visualization here, but I think an interactive demonstration of this would be much better than running through some slides here. So at this point of the webinar, I'm going to switch over to the live demo so you guys can actually take a look at clarity. But just at a high level, with clarity, this tool will automatically discover and classify your security groups by level of exposure. It includes object-based IP management with IP lists, VPC flow log overlays for traffic analysis, and click-through mediation. So with that said, we should see the clarity module here, and I'm just going to refresh my session. And for those who are familiar with Amazon anyway, because I'm going to be looking at an Amazon example today, we can look at our VPC and take a look at our security groups. And I'm sure many of you are familiar with a perspective like this, where we have many security groups listed. In fact, this one VPC in one account in one region has 93 security groups. We look at the inbound roles and we have IP addresses listed and other security group IDs represented here, which don't really tell us too much. So imagine trying to understand whether this is exactly as you expect and if there are any misconfigurations. So we take the metadata through Dome9 and we analyze it and we put it into a visualization for you. So I've clicked through on my prod account here. I've clicked on my Oregon region. First thing I see is all my VPC peering relationships. I'm going to click it through into the security group view. And again, right now we're analyzing all that metadata right off the bat. And we're putting a view like this and turning it into a view like this, which is much more easy to digest and analyze and identify misconfigurations visually. So in terms of Dome9 and how we secure your environment, this side of the platform, the clarity module, the visualization module, the responsibility is on yourself to come in here and visually assess what's going on. And then we have the compliance and governance module, which will later will show that actually will run regular checks and analyze the actual data and create alerts for you. But in this view, this is the visualization tool, so we're going to poke around here and understand what's going on. We have security groups here that we know are in use because we see a number at the top right-hand corner. That lets us know that we're in use for the security group. If it weren't in use, we could actually go in and make some changes or delete a security group that weren't in use. For example, a load balancer in the DMZ here is here because it has one of 3 rules are wide open to the public internet with a IP grant of 000/0. And then we have a default security group, which maybe shouldn't be used at all, but that's also here. And that's arrived in the DMZ as well because it has port 22 wide open the internet. And so from here, the workflow looks like this. You can click through in the central management console and actually make your changes or delete the security group entirely. And you can turn on full protection mode, which will enable tamper protection, preventing people from coming into the console natively going forward once we have it the way we like it. So if I were to come in here and make changes to a security group that I had locked down, we're going to track that, notify you if there is a change, and actually revert that change back to its original state and put it into the audit log. So this is the clarity module. If we go back to the presentation here, next we have the compliance engine. And the compliance engine, out of the box, we provide, like I said earlier, such bundles as PCI, HIPAA, best practice for AWS, things of this nature. We provide you this breakdown of your pass-fail ratio and break things out by region, and you can actually analyze the different fail checks here. So let's take a look at that in a live demo scenario. So I'm going to go into the compliance engine, and I'm finding my PCI bundle here. I can actually customize these bundles and make them my own, but let's take a look at what this looks like when we actually just run this PCI bundle against one account. You have the option to run against all accounts, and you can run this on a schedule if you'd like, and email yourself a report to show all the deltas of how things are changing between runs, and the frequency of those runs are configured by the end user here in Dome 9. So we can come into the compliance engine here and take a look at the results. We see our pass-fail ratio. We can scroll around and find out how we're doing as we click around the regions and see the statistics there. We can expand out some of these rules around removed unused security groups, expand those out, and see all of our non-complying security groups that are violating this rule. And this rule, we're checking to see if there's unused security groups, so maybe you want to clean those up. You don't want to have those hanging around and potentially getting misused. So you might want to go and clean it up, click through again. You're going to wind up in the central management console, and you can delete that security group right from here if you'd like, if that's something you want to do. And then you go back, run the check again until things look the way you want. Just the same. Remember we talked about now you're responsible for the in the new world, after the gateway-centric approach, all your services are typically protected by security groups now, which you're responsible to configure. We have a rule here to make sure that you don't have public access over port 22 for any of your services. And we can expand that out again, find offending security groups, and make our changes. And we support many different entity types. We're not just checking for security groups. We can also use our filter on the left side here and take a look at our S3 bucket rules. And something we see in the news today a lot is making sure that your S3 bucket policies and ACLs are configured properly. We've seen many, many breaches in the news in the last 6 months alone, where millions of pieces of data have been lost or potentially exposed, potential loss anyway. So we have a rule that actually in a compliance engine that will ensure that S3 buckets are not publicly accessible. We can expand that out and see all the offending S3 buckets there and take a preview of that metadata surrounding that particular bucket. And what's great about Dome 9 is if you actually want to come in here and make changes to some of these rules, you can do that. You just make a copy of it. And we have a syntax called governance specification language, and I can expose that just by clicking the slider here. We can actually take a look at some of these rules and make changes, and we see when I click that GSL slider, we can now see the GSL rules associated with these particular assets. And this is as close to English as possible, right? So you can quickly understand what this rule is trying to do, and in free text I can make changes here. Click Save if that's something I want to do. And if I want to create a new rule, it's pretty simple as well. GSL is pretty straightforward, and you're more than welcome to learn how to do that in free form But we also have a nifty little rule builder for building something like an instance tagging convention that you would like to enforce. So let's just say you want to make sure that every instance you spin up has an owner tag or some sort of tag. It's really just a point and click scenario. Instance should have tags contain key equals owner. And you can create additional requirements here by clicking and or. Close that off. And before I actually save this rule, I can actually just test it against one account and just make sure it's working the way I expect. And we indeed have 70 tested entities here, 68 are non-complying. We can expand that out and find all those offending instances that don't have that owner tag. So it's a very powerful tool. And we provide dashboards to see how you trend over a period of time. We can take a look at the statistics we have all our environments represented in this dashboard and our various bundles here that are running on a regular basis. And just by clicking the statistics icon, I could see how those things are changing from run to run. Coming back to the presentation here. And also we have identity and access management protection for IAM users and IAM roles. And this is what we talked about earlier about elevating user access in the AWS console natively using an out-of-band device like an Android device. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to come into IAM safety. All right, so we have enrolling in IAM safety is pretty straightforward. Basically, you're going to come into this module, click Get Started, and you can pick any sensitive services. Remember, this is protecting against sensitive services that are irrevocable. So out of the 2,000 actions that you can take in AWS, 300 of which are irrevocable. So that's things like deleting S3 buckets, deleting EBS volumes, terminating instances. So if you, and in this demo, I like to show Route 53 because maybe someone gains access to your environment. It's not really a question of if, but when. So maybe they come into Route 53, which is our DNS service, and maybe they want to come in and redirect traffic to their servers instead of yours and capture all that user data. So I've decided that I want to enroll Route 53 in my IAM safety program. So this is a little helper for you. You can actually build a deny policy right from here for Route 53. So now when I apply this to my account, this is what IAM safety is going to be applying, or I should say attaching and detaching as users elevate themselves after enrollment. So let's go jump back over to the Amazon console here, and I'm going to go to Route 53 and see what that looks like right now without being elevated. And we see that indeed, I'm already enrolled in IAM safety. I don't have access to Route 53 because in this particular instance, that's the only thing I'm denying on, but it could literally be anything that makes sense for you and your organization. So now I have my virtual Android device here, and imagine that I'm a legitimate user and I own that account. And I want to elevate myself because I have legitimate reasons why I need to get into Route 53. So I'm ready to make my changes, but right now I don't. So I come into my phone, and I'm already enrolled here. I just click play. And now this Android device has reached out to Dome9 and let Dome9 know that this particular Dome9 user, Matt, wants to elevate his privilege for his associated account in Amazon. So then Dome9 reaches out to AWS and removes that restrictive policy. So now that policy that we created earlier that was denying that privilege is now removed from my account. And if I click refresh here, I now have access to Route 53 to make all the changes that I need to make. And after 15 minutes time, this will automatically expire. Or if I'm done, I just click stop here. And again, we're going through the process of the phone is reaching out to Dome9, letting Dome9 know, hey, I'm done. Let's reapply that deny policy. And in turn, Amazon is made notice through the API, and we click refresh again, and we see it takes about 10-15 seconds. And here we go. Now we're back to erroring out. We don't have access to that service no longer. So indeed, Dome 9 is a force multiplier for cloud security operations. We're looking at the security groups we looked at earlier and saw how we can take a view like this and put it into the Dome 9 console and analyze all that metadata and reformatting it into something that makes a little bit more sense to you. And it's easy to parse through multiple cloud accounts. So you have to imagine if you have one cloud account, but what if you have 10 cloud accounts? What if you have 50? In large organizations, there's 1,000 cloud accounts. So it's really dependent on how you break out your environments. As time goes on, we're seeing a trend towards every single application has its own individual cloud account, just for micro-segmentation purposes. So managing all that stuff in one place becomes more important, especially when you consider that multi-cloud adoption is also growing, where you're not just dealing with Amazon or Azure. Maybe you're dealing with Amazon, Azure, and Google Cloud Platform. That's the trend that Dome 9 is seeing, and we support all three. And again, we're taking all that metadata and putting into these security swim lanes, these zones, which are indeed swim lanes, I should say. So what's the difference here? Why Dome 9? Well, it's effortless. Deployment is indeed under 5 minutes in POC and production. You're just setting up a cross-account access role. There's no secret keys in terms of AWS to get lost. Nothing to install or maintain for AWS, Azure, or GCP. It's all API-based. SaaS-based solution that scales with your needs. So there's no appliance to put into your data center. It's really just enrolling your account, and every account you want to set up takes all of 5 minutes time, and that indeed in itself could be fully automated into your organization. And it's powerful. So the only solution offering visibility, in-place remediation, and continuous enforcement. So you actually have the ability to not only enforce the configuration of your security groups, but we have technical add-ons which allow you to actually take failed compliance entities such as a security group, instance, S3 bucket, things like this, and actually create auto remediation tasks to either quarantine those assets or other remediation actions. Maybe you want to stop an instance if it's vulnerable. You can do that within your environment. Network security and IAM protection capabilities. We have simplified regulatory compliance checking, PCI DSS, HIPAA, CIIS, and NIST, and obviously we're always adding to that list, of course. And so no entities are left behind. So we protect AWS Lambda, ELB, RDS, and your general cloud instances. Again, we are an API-based solution for AWS, Azure, and GCP. There is no appliance. And we ensure consistent policies across regions, accounts, and clouds. So you're looking at the cloud. Well, I should say the Dome 9 architecture, as you see represented here. So we have a full API toolkit. We have hooks into your SIEM tool, so you can push all that Dome 9 information to your SIEM tool for processing and analytics. We offer alerts and notifications, operations console for you to manage your cloud environments right from Dome 9, and instant access with our mobile app you can download in your app store. So we're nearing the end of our presentation here anyway. So we encourage you to sign up for the 14-day trial of Dome 9 Arc today. So you can go right to dome9.com and enroll yourself. And again, setup is super easy. Takes all of 5 minutes. Um, and so with that, I'd like to turn it back over to Thelen to see if we have any questions that we'd like to tackle here in the webinar today.
Yeah, sure, Matt. All right, it looks like we have a few questions. The first one is, how do we support multi-cloud environments?
Sure. Let's jump over to the console actually. Let's close this out. So in Dome 9, you could easily add as many cloud accounts as you like. We support AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. And so you can imagine we have only a few here in this demo environment, but you could literally add as many as you'd like, and we support them in similar ways. And really, in terms of AWS, which we find is the most popular, you can onboard yourself in read-only mode or the full protection mode. There's benefits, obviously, to enrolling yourself in the read-write mode or full protection mode, things like tamper protection, and dynamic access leasing, and some other things. So it's really just a matter of just adding all your accounts here. Each type really is only 5 minutes. That's not an exaggeration. And we're pulling all the metadata from your account using the API. So it's 100% agentless, and there's nothing to install.
Okay, next question. How do I create a custom rule?
Oh, great. So we can have a couple different examples there. One thing that falls out of this PCI compliance bundle is we see a lot of clients are interested in enforcing that their EC2 instances are using encryption, volume encryption. So if we wanted to add that rule in a custom bundle, it's pretty straightforward. We could just say instance should have, let's see here, volumes with encrypted equals true. So just by clicking around, like not knowing how to do something, you can kind of find your way to get to that point where you have success filtering out and checking the compliance of those assets. So this looks like it's worked. So we have 70 tested assets and 69 are non-complying. And some can be more complex than others, and if they are complex, if someone is trialing our software and for proof of concept purposes, we can actually help you. There's resources out there that we can assign to help you build your rules out if you're having challenges. But generally, it's pretty easy. You can get creative and play around with this, but we think the point and click rule builder is very strong and very helpful for someone who's just learning the platform for the first time.
Okay. Next question. Do you support granular controls for role-based security?
We do. We do. It's interesting. So you can actually assign direct permissions to users or roles. And if we actually create a role, or let me just edit one here. We have, depending on the permissions you're looking for, we have different granularity. So maybe you have a business unit or several business units that you want them to only be able to see the specific accounts that pertain to them. So from a management perspective, I can get very granular. So I can say this role or user has access to all AWS accounts, Azure, Google, if that makes sense. But let's just say it's Amazon. We can scope that down to maybe just the production account, or go a step further and scope it down to the Oregon region, or go even a step further and assign a specific security group. So if you want one user or one group to have access to a single security group, you have that option. It gets very granular, but maybe that's a little bit too too tight to scope out that way. So you can just do it at the region level or account level, whatever makes sense for you, but the option is there to do so.
Okay, we have a few more. So what happens when I have real firewall products in the cloud? How does Clarity understand how that affects flows?
So I imagine we're talking about, let's go back here in the presentation. So if you have a real firewall device, like let's just say you're running on an EC2 instance, Palo Alto or firewalls or whatever name brand that you may be running, um, those are indeed protected by security groups as well. So indeed, we don't get down to the host level at all. That's not Dome9's intention. So we're pulling everything from the API layer. So at that point, by having those physical, or I shouldn't say physical, but those virtual firewalls in the cloud that are outside the scope of AWS, you're the one responsible for gaining visibility into those specific assets, right? So because there's no visibility, there's no information coming from those that's available from the Amazon API, Dome9 is not going to have any visibility into those. So, but those actual firewalls will have security groups around those, so those will be represented in a diagram like this, because you can't have those EC2 instances without security groups, right? So those security groups will show up here, but it wouldn't be possible to get insights into those actual virtual appliances.
Okay, next question. Does Dome9 support a SSO implementation with AWS?
Yes, so we support, for example, if you have group mapping with Active Directory, you can configure single sign-on with Dome9. So I imagine that question comes because they have their users mapped in groups of some sort in some identity provider, and when they log into Amazon, those groups give them rights over certain accounts. And it works in a similar way for Dome9. So if you have identity provider, we absolutely provide single sign-on by means of a single SAML 2.0 compliant service.
Okay, does Dome9 interface with AWS IAM to facilitate user profile management?
Could you repeat that?
Sure. Does Dome9 interface with AWS IAM to facilitate user profile management?
Oh, okay. I think I understand the question. So I think the question is around, so in Dome9 we have a lot of different management tools baked right into the platform. So we support management of security groups and management of Dome9 users themselves. IAM safety allows us to manage a single policy around users who want to elevate themselves. But if the question is around, can we modify IAM user profiles from within Dome9, the answer is no. That's not a layer that we work at, and would probably be a little dangerous for a third-party tool to actually interface at that level with anyway. We don't want to necessarily have access over your IAM user rights. And if you take a look at the rights we ask for, even in full protection mode, they're not very permissive. So in the read-only policy, we're just looking to have access to your logs, your CloudTrail events, your Lambda lists, your S3 list, and things of that nature. And even in the write policy, we wouldn't want to manage your IAM users in the first place, because really even in the write scenario, we're only asking to modify security groups, create security groups, delete security groups, and modify and delete tags. So so the answer is no there. And I wouldn't foresee Dome9 going in that direction either.
Okay. Next question. Any ETA for getting QRadar DSM?
QRadar DSM. I have not heard anything about that. So I would have to say No.
Okay. Next question. What is the security implementation between the mobile Dome 9 app and the Dome 9 API server?
Could you repeat that again?
Sure. What is the security implementation between the mobile Dome 9 app and the Dome 9 API server?
What is the security implementation? I think we just covered that actually when I was explaining that other issue. Um, so we're just setting up the cross-account access role. If we add a cloud account, AWS, um, you can actually, when you sign up for your trial, you're going to step through this just the same. Um, so you're able to create a policy, and then once that policy is created with those read-only permissions, you're going to click next here, and you're going to provide. This is our Amazon account number because Domain actually runs in Amazon itself, right? So you're creating a cross-account access role. So and then you're just granting access from one AWS account to another, and then we're just pulling metadata from that point.
Okay. Next question. What credentials do I provide for you to be able to access my account? What permissions would this user need?
Yes, I already answered that one as well. So that's around. I hate to be redundant, but again, if you sign up for the trial, you can actually see the policy documents right here, and this is everything we ask for. Only thing you don't see here is that we ask you also. There's a security audit policy that it's an AWS managed policy that comes out of the box, and in addition to our read-only policy, we ask for the security audit policy as well, and just add that in as well, and that's through the cross-account access role. They mention IAM user, but it's actually a role, not a user.
Okay. Is it possible to protect critical DNS records in Route 53?
Yeah, actually, that's a perfect use case for the demo I just went through. So we can't protect them from getting changed by valid users. Right now, we don't have a way to. There's no way to write a compliance and governance policy around specific values in your Route 53 configuration. But if you're worried about the configuration changing, that's when we can actually, well, actually I closed it out, but in the demo for IAM safety, we actually are able to protect a service that is sensitive to you. So that's a perfect use case for IAM safety, so that unless a user elevates themselves, a legitimate user elevates themselves using their out-of-band device like a phone, you can block access to Route 53. So if no one is authorized to be there and they don't have that out-of-band device to elevate that privilege, they're not going to be able to. So in terms of that, yes, we can protect Route 53.
Okay, and once we have Dome 9 in our environment, how frequently does Dome 9 collect data from our cloud accounts?
So the answer is it varies. So things like security group metadata, it's quite frequent. It's probably the most responsive of all the different API entities that we pull. It depends though. So AWS has natural thresholds which limit the amount of time that or amount of frequency we can pull specific APIs. But we have, for much larger environments, we have a back pressure detection system so that if we do detect back pressure from AWS or any other cloud provider for that matter, we're going to space out our calls. In larger environments, if it becomes a problem, we do have the ability to customize the frequency of those calls. Maybe for your environment, you want us to make updates half the time that we normally do. So you can actually modify those calls by 50%. So, and depending on the actual entity that we're polling, there's different rules that AWS or AWS has for those specific entities. So maybe one service allows us to pull a lot more frequently than some other service. So therefore, on average, we're always refreshing the data every 2.5 minutes on average.
Okay, and our last question. When you are using the view in the Clarity feature, when it is performing the describe API calls, is it doing that in real time, or can it create a snapshot and run return results locally?
So when you run the Clarity tool, it's not pulling that information necessarily right that second. Because of the API limitations, those limitations that Amazon has and how frequently anyone can touch their APIs, that information is refreshed every 2.5 minutes. So if I were to make changes in a default security group like this one, it would roughly be about 2.5 minutes between the time I make the change here and when it could be reflected in Clarity, for example, because of those limitations that Amazon imposes on everybody.
Okay. Well, thank you, Matt. All right, everyone. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you for attending. If you have any further questions on the information presented today, please don't hesitate to reach out to us via the email q&anda@dome9.com. I have a few final notes. If you have enjoyed the webinar presented today and would like to experience the Dome9 ARC platform for yourself, we are offering a more detailed personal demo or a 14-day free trial. Please visit our website at www.dome9.com and click on the Get Started button on our home page. Just register and a representative from Dome9 will contact you to schedule a demo or activate your free trial. Additionally, if you liked the webinar today and would like to hear more about the multi-cloud security solutions Dome9 provides, please visit the resources page on our website and sign up for several of our upcoming webinars, or go to www.dome9.com/webinars. If there's a topic you would like us to discuss, please contact us through our website and let us know. With that, we thank you for your time today and hope you found the content informative. This now concludes the Dome9 webinar. Enjoy the rest of your day.